Okay, so now we're going to look at an example of standard deviation. Now, standard deviation, it's on mom. Oops, it is in your homework 17. But for your notes, this is going to be in homework 16, and I think I put 17A with it. Lecture notes. And this is the last page. So we're going to be talking about standard deviation. And again, standard deviation is going to be on your mom homework 17. Okay? Okay, so it says compute the standard deviation of the following data. Round your answer to the nearest hundredths. Okay, so we'll look at that later. So the first thing that we're going to do is look at these numbers. How many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 8 total. Now, it didn't tell me in the problem, did it? Which, remember, your total is your n. So your n is 8. Okay? Now, we haven't really talked about the n thing much, maybe a little bit, but that's just the number of items you have. And really, when you have a little n, it means this is a sample numbers. A big N, if they used a big N, it'd be the whole population. So rarely do you see the big N. And that's one reason when we get a little further into this that when we do the standard deviation, when we look at the formula, standard deviation is the square root of, and this little squiggly thing is sum of each x minus x bar, which that's your mean, squared. Now, instead of using this weird formula, we're going to do it in pieces. Now, notice that it's n minus 1. So when we're using a sample standard deviation, we always do take the total number that we have for the sample and subtract 1 from it. In statistics, it just makes it a more accurate thing. If you had the whole population, you would just use a capital N and not have to subtract a 1 from it. Just a little extra. Okay, so we're going to round to the nearest hundredth. Okay. Now, the step 1 is going to be to find your mean. That's always going to be first. I'm going to be very mean if you forget that. Step 1. Find x bar, which is your mean. Okay? So how do we find mean?
Add up all the numbers.
Mm-hmm. And do what?
Divided by 8.
Yes. So this we're going to divide by 8. We always, for average, you always add up the numbers, divide by the total. Very good. Okay, so if you got your handy calculator, go ahead and add those up. Now, for time's sake, since I know y'all can do that, I would probably total it here, 414, and I would add it up again. 13 plus 25. Like I told you, I used to work in accounting, and everything I did, I would do it twice. If I didn't get the same number, I'd do it again. I just keep writing down my totals until I got 2 the same, and I'm like, okay, that's got to be right. But if I wasn't sure, I'd go back and check again, check and recheck. So 414 divided by 8. Let me get my calculator because I don't know if that was rounded or not. It wasn't rounded. That's exactly 51.75. Now, one thing to note about this is I probably wouldn't round that. That came out exactly 51.75. If it came out to be a long number, I would probably take it out, you know, 3 or 4 decimal places. Like if it says it's going to go to the 100th place, I would take it out further right now because that's for your answer. Your answer is going to be rounded, but you want to take your mean out further if you have to so that you don't have rounding issues. Okay, so step 2. Now this is where we're going to set up kind of a chart here. So we're just going to ignore that home phone number that's ringing. Okay, so we're going to do our x minus x bar. But one way to do this, you could write your numbers down here. Now this takes a little bit longer to write it down. This is how my professor at Bates Clear Lake did it when we first started doing all this stuff. She kind of did it step by step, and I think it kind of helps. So we have just our x's, and then our x bar is 51.75. Now that's the same for everything. You might not want to take the time to write. Sometimes I would just do like a squiggly line going all the way down, like these are all 51.75. But it, you know, so you don't really have to do this step. But it kind of helps us to see x minus x bar here. Now we're really going to be doing x minus x bar squared. But we're going to kind of do this out the long way today, just to make sure I'll understand what you're doing. 13 minus 51.75 equals. Now, what's interesting, I'm getting negative 38.75. I'm getting a negative number. Well, no, wait a minute. I shouldn't get a negative. Oh, yeah, I should. Oh, I didn't write it out. Hold on a second. That's what I forgot. Hold on just a second. I'm kind of looking at one thing and doing something different than what I have written down. Okay, so let's write it out. 13 minus 51.75. 23 minus 51.75. And again, you don't have to show all these steps for me. If I'm going to show you the long way, okay? If you're not sure how to do this, then I would write all this out, at least at first, until you get very comfortable with standard deviation. So we're going to write what that number is. Now, you don't necessarily would have to do that, because we're going to end up squaring them, but I'm going to write out this first one, because notice I'm getting 13 minus 51.75. That the negative is bigger, so it's going to be a negative number. And that's one reason why we have to square them, because we have to have them all positive. 23 minus 51.75. So if you've got your calculator handy, which you should, and guys, next week, you're going to have your TI 30X to, let's see, it's 2S, 30X, 2S. I would get this because the formulas are going to get crazy, and it's going to be so much easier if you've got one. They cost $10 to $15, I think maybe $14 or something at Walmart. It's going to be worth it to get one. Now, if y'all get a different number than me, please tell me, because I don't want to mess up. So I want y'all checking me. Because I'm just kind of doing this and eyeballing the computer screen at the same time, so I can make a mistake. So notice that some of the numbers are positive and some are negative. These are ended up being positive. And it makes sense because we've got the positive number is larger than what we're subtracting from it. Now here's where I would make sure that I'm getting these numbers right. And you could have gone ahead and squared it. 51, if you're sure that you're very careful on your calculator. But I wanted to show you this. Okay, so here's let me kind of make some columns so it looks like you can see it a little bit better. All we did was we wrote our X values in here. And then we wrote our mean value here. And then we're just doing X minus the mean for this number. So now we're going to do that squared. Okay, so I'm going to take this number and square it. Now again, you could have done this in one step. You could have done X minus X bar squared and kind of done it all together. But I think it's really easy to make a mistake that way. So notice what happens when I take that 38.75. Now on this calculator, you put your little negative at the bottom, not the minus sign, but there's a little negative in parentheses at the bottom. Put your negative in first. Some of them you don't. My financial calculator in college, you didn't, which was kind of weird. And then I can square it. Now there is a squared, yeah, there's an X squared button on the left of your calculator. If you've got this kind of calculator. So you can just put this in and then square it. You don't have to put parentheses around it. You can just put a negative. So in my calculator, I would put negative 38.75, and then I hit the X squared button, and it's going to put the little 2 up there. Square it. Then you just hit enter. Okay, so now I'm getting some bigger numbers. Well, I think I might as well make those orange. 1501, and I wouldn't round it. It goes out to 56.25. I mean, 0.5625. Negative 1501.65. Okay, so you're going to do that for each one. So I want you to take your calculator and do that. So if you're watching the video, you could pause it for a minute while we do this. So think about this, 3.25 squared. Well, you know 3 squared is 9, so it should be a little bit more than that. Kind of make sure that the numbers that you get make sense. 11 times 11 is 121, so it should be bigger than that. I'm getting 126.5625. And then, so I'm actually looking at a paper that these were already done, so you may be getting yours done a little bit quicker. Okay, so I'm going to check on one or two of these just to make sure. Okay. Now, okay, so notice that anytime you have a negative squared, remember that's really like you're doing negative times negative. Let me see. Aggie Maroon looks good. Right here. Negative 38.75 times negative 38.75. If you're really doing negative times negative, because remember, anytime you have something squared, it's telling you to multiply it twice. So you should get, what I'm saying is you should get a, oh, I wrote a negative there. I should get a positive 1501.5625. Good thing I wrote that out, because that should be a positive. Okay, so all of your numbers here in this row, they're all squared numbers. So they all should be positive. When I square negative numbers, negative times negative is positive. Negative times negative is positive. And of course, when I have positive times positive is positive. So they should all be positive. That's why we have to square these numbers so that they're all positive. Later, we end up taking the square root. Why do you think we have to square them and then take the square root? That doesn't make any sense. But that's the main reason. We want to get rid of those negatives. So we're going to add all of this up. 1501.5625 plus 826.5625 plus 217.5. You got to be very careful as you're doing this. So you add them all up, because remember, we're trying to get the sum of, which is that, I liked making these little squiggly E things. Look kind of like that. That just means the sum of. And sum means to add, right? So we're going to add these up. If I add these on my calculator, and I would do this a couple of times just to check, okay? I'm getting 5,311.5. Now, I would not round here. That one probably just came out that way. Do not round yet. We're going to round at the end, okay? That will help you when you get to these problems. Okay, so all we've done is in our, so remember our standard deviation formula? We now have the sum of, oops, I didn't write it out. The sum of x minus x bar. Okay, so we did our x minus x bar, we squared it, we found those numbers, we add them up. Now we have that top part, okay? So I think it's almost easier at this point to go ahead and say, okay, the standard deviation is square root of, we're going to do the sum of, I guess I'll go ahead and write that out. So that would be our 5,311.5 that we figured out for that. We're going to plug it in there. Divided by, remember how I told you that when we're using a sample space, we're going to do n minus 1 at the bottom. So what was n again? N is how many numbers we had. How many numbers did we have to begin with? Nobody remembers? How many original numbers did we have?
8.
Yeah. We're going to subtract 1 from it. Okay? And then, so we just got to figure this out. So when you have a square root, it's kind of like a parenthesis. It's not really a parenthesis, but you treat it that way. So order of operations, I'm going to do everything I can inside the square root first. So I'm going to take that 5311.5, and actually, let me rewrite it. It should be over 7, right? go ahead and rewrite that.
Okay, so I'm going to figure out the 5311.5 divided by 7 first. 5311.5 divided by 7
is 750. Now, I do not want to round this. In fact, I'm going to leave it on my calculator. So try that on your calculator. When I do on my calculator, let me put that over to the side. On my calculator, I did 5311.5 divided by 7. Okay, and I did enter. And I'm getting this on my calculator. So, you know what? I don't know that that's going to work. I think then you can't do square root afterwards, can you? Now, to find the square root on your calculator, you're going to have to hit the blue second button, because when you find it, it's really above the x squared button. There's on the left side, there's an x squared button, and then written in blue above it is a square root that looks like this. Okay? So if I hit the blue second button first, and that's in your top left of your calculator, hit the second button, and then hit x squared. Now, I don't think, hold on a minute, let me try something. Yeah, it's, that's not going to work. So, I mean, that does bring it up. So to get square root, you can do second and then x squared. So really what you could do, I mean, you could do this. You could do this and get the 758.785713.3, and then you could go ahead and do your second button, and then hit your x squared. If you know how to do the answer thing, you do that. So if I kind of clear my thing and go second, and then I hit my x squared, which, no, it didn't work. Okay, there we go. Hit the blue second button, and then the x squared button. That's going to give you the square root. When you do that, what shows on your screen looks like this. And then you can enter in your 758, whatever. And then you got to close a parenthesis. It opens it for you. This is what the calculator does. You'll see square root with an open parenthesis. Then you've got to close it. Close your parenthesis. Okay, you got to do that. And then you can hit enter. So let me do that. 758.785. So hopefully you've got your calculator there. You try it. Close parenthesis. Because if you don't, when you get on the test, you're not going to remember how to do all this stuff. You should be practicing it. So I'm getting 27.54606, something like that. Okay, so that's it. Now, we still had to take the square root of this guy. Okay, so what we did is 5311.5 divided by 7. We're still inside the square root, and I'm getting this. Then I got to take the square root of that. Okay, now you might be able to do the whole thing on your calculator right here if you do the square root first. So if I did that, let me do that real quick because I want to go on. So what I could do, let's see, on calculator, I could do the square root. So how did we get to the square root again? The second blue button at the top left. And then if I hit the x squared button, what you're going to see is, let me clear this and do it. oops, I need to make sure it's cleared all the way. You may have to hit clear a couple times. Okay, second x squared. Now all I see on my screen is, this is what I see on my screen. Square root with an open parenthesis. Okay, so that's on my screen. So then what I do, okay, so this is what you see on screen on your calculator. Then we need to put this, well, we can do this 5311. Okay, so we're going to put in 50.5 divided by 7. And remember, we need to close the parenthesis as well. Okay, so that's kind of doing it all in one step. Oh, I just cleared myself. So second x squared, and I'm going to put in my 5311.5 divided by 7, and then close parenthesis, and then hit enter. I'm getting the same thing. So that takes me, if I do this, let's see, let me kind of put that in purple color. If I do this on my calculator, so right here, if I do all this on my calculator, it takes me all the way to my answer. Okay, it takes me to 27.54606. Now, you could have gone ahead and gone inside the parenthesis, inside the square root, and done 5311.5 divided by 7 and gotten this number. If you do that, then you would need to go over here and do the calculator this way. Okay? Or you could do this down here. I'm doing it in steps. So you may want to do that at first, kind of do it in steps and see what you're doing. Then maybe later you can go, hey, I can do this whole thing in my calculator. Now we needed to round this. So we're kind of through, but not through. We need to round it. So what did it say? Round to the nearest hundredth place. So which number is in the hundredth place? Somebody needs to tell me. Oh, now I want to talk about your project. Okay, that's a good guess. That's good. That's close. We've narrowed it. We've narrowed it down. 4, because remember, yeah, that's okay. Hey, I'm glad you said that because that means I need to go back over it. So remember the first number past the decimal is tenths and then hundredths. Okay. So remember there's no such thing as the once place. Yeah, that looks kind of funny. Once place. And tenths, hundreds. Now on the other side of the decimal, it is ones, tens, hundreds, but over here you start with tens place. Okay, so the hundredths place is the second one, right? And then we look at the next number is the judge. So if that number is a large number, 5 to 9, what is that going to make us do? I couldn't do it. That means we're going to drop off at the hundredths place is going to be the last digit you have. If you're told to round to the hundredths place, you're going to have to the hundredths place and stop. So if we're rounding up one, it would be 27.55. Okay, so we rounded that 4 up to a 5. That's approximately equal. I like making those. And so that's it. So it seems like a lot, I know, but again, you're really just using this one formula right here. You got to find the sum of x minus your mean on all of them. You got to square them, and get the sum of all that. So to kind of break it down, I think this helps. We did this, now we got into a lot more complicated tables
makes it much easier to see what you're doing. So all I did is I wrote all my X values down that they gave me in a column. Then I found my mean. That was kind of the first thing we did. So we did step 1, and then the rest of this is step, I guess this would be step 2 through, I guess step 2 would be finding your X minus X bar. Pick up my stylus pen. Step 2, we're going to do the X minus X bar squared, actually the sum of it. So that's kind of what this whole chart is, isn't it? We found the sum of, that's that E-looking thing, the sum of X minus X bar, which X bar is your mean, isn't it? Don't forget that. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay, so I think that kind of is a good example for you guys to have for your standard deviation. Oops. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video. See y'all later.